They threw out a black family for not fitting the restaurant's standards. But what the owner didn't know, the teenage son recording everything was about to bring his entire world crashing down. This is a story about courage, justice, and the power of standing up when everyone expects you to back down. It was a humid Saturday evening in Charleston when the Henderson family walked through the glass doors of the Sterling Oak, one of the city's most prestigious restaurants. 14-year-old Jamal Henderson held the door open for his mother, Vanessa, a graceful woman in her early 40s whose warm brown eyes carried both gentleness and an unshakable strength forged through years of navigating a world that didn't always see her worth. His father, Terrence, a tall man with graying temples and the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned every success through relentless work, placed his hand on Jamal's shoulder as they entered. Jamal's little sister, 8-year-old Zara, skipped ahead, her braids bouncing, completely unaware that this dinner celebrating her elementary school achievement would become something none of them would ever forget. The restaurant's interior gleamed with crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths so pristine they seemed to glow under the soft lighting. Classical music drifted through the air, mixing with the murmur of conversation from well-dressed patrons. This was supposed to be special. Zara had won first place in the state science fair, and Terrence had made reservations weeks ago, specifically requesting a table by the window overlooking the historic harbor. But as the Henderson family stood in the entrance, something shifted. The hostess, a young woman with blonde hair pulled back severely, looked up from her podium and her welcoming smile froze. Her eyes swept over the family, lingering just a moment too long, and that smile transformed into something else entirely, something cold and assessing. "Do you have a reservation?" she asked, her tone suddenly clipped. "Yes, Henderson party of 4. 7 o'clock, Terrence replied, checking his watch. They were right on time. The hostess tapped at her tablet, her manicured nails clicking against the screen. The pause stretched uncomfortably long. "I'm not seeing it." Vanessa leaned forward slightly. "My husband made the reservation 3 weeks ago. Perhaps you could check again?" Henderson H. Jamal noticed something in that moment that his parents, focused on the hostess, missed. From the corner of his eye, he saw the restaurant owner, a portly man in his late 50s with a flushed face and slicked-back silver hair, emerge from the back office. The man's name was Richard Thornberry, though Jamal wouldn't learn that until later. Richard's eyes landed on the Henderson family, and he whispered something to a waiter nearby. The waiter nodded and quickly moved away. The hostess looked up, her expression now apologetic in a way that felt practiced rather than genuine. "I'm so sorry, but we're completely booked tonight. We must have had a system error when your reservation was made." Terrence's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Vanessa's hand found his arm, a gentle restraint. But Jamal saw everything. He saw the half-empty dining room behind the hostess stand. He saw Richard Thornberry watching them from across the room with undisguised contempt. And he saw the white family that had walked in immediately after them being warmly greeted and led to their table without any mention of reservations or availability. Something hardened in Jamal's chest. His father had taught him about moments like these. They'd had conversations at the dinner table about dignity, about choosing battles, about the exhausting calculus black families had to perform every day. When to speak up, when to let things go, how to protect your children from the ugliness of the world while also preparing them for it. But watching his little sister's excited face fall into confusion, watching his mother square her shoulders in that particular way she did when she was trying not to cry, Jamal made a decision. He pulled out his phone and started recording. "Sir, ma'am, perhaps we could try another evening," the hostess was saying, but her words felt hollow, scripted. Terrence's voice remained steady, controlled. "I'd like to speak with the manager, please." And that's when Richard Thornberry decided to approach. "Is there a problem here?" Richard asked, his voice carrying an edge of authority and irritation. He positioned himself between the hostess stand and the family, his arms crossed over his chest. "We have a reservation, but apparently there's been some confusion," Terrence explained, maintaining his composure even as the situation became increasingly tense. Richard barely glanced at the reservation book. "Look, I don't know what to tell you. We're full. The Oak has certain standards we maintain, and we're simply at capacity tonight." The way he emphasized standards made his meaning crystal clear. Vanessa's eyes flashed. "Standards? We have a confirmed reservation. My husband received a confirmation email." "Ma'am, I don't appreciate the tone," Richard said, his voice rising slightly. Other diners were beginning to notice the commotion. "If you don't have a reservation in our system, then I'm afraid you'll need to leave." Jamal kept his phone steady, making sure to capture everything. His heart was pounding, but his hand didn't shake. He'd been watching his father's friend, Uncle Derek, live stream on social media for months, learning about angles and audio quality. He knew this footage needed to be clear. "Daddy, I don't understand," Zara whispered, tugging on Terrence's jacket. "Why can't we eat here?" That question, innocent and heartbreaking, seemed to lance through the tension in the air. Vanessa knelt down, gathering her daughter close, whispering reassurances that everything would be okay, even though nothing about this situation was okay. Richard's face reddened further. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave now. You're causing a disturbance." "We're causing a disturbance?" Terrence's voice finally carried an edge. "We walked in with a reservation, and we're being told to leave while you're seating people who arrived after us." "Don't you dare accuse me of," Richard sputtered. "Security." A large man in a dark suit appeared from somewhere in the restaurant's shadows. This was Marcus. No, wait. This was Dale, a security guard who looked distinctly uncomfortable with what he was being asked to do. "Escort these people out," Richard commanded. Dale hesitated. "Sir, maybe we should just—" "Did I ask for your opinion?" "Get them out of my restaurant." That's when Vanessa stood up, her full height matching Richard's, her voice calm but carrying a power that made everyone within earshot stop and listen. "You are making a terrible mistake." Richard laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Is that a threat? Are you threatening me in my own establishment?" "It's not a threat," Vanessa said quietly. "It's a fact. You're refusing service to my family based on the color of our skin, and that is illegal. It's also being recorded." She gestured to Jamal, who held up his phone clearly. Richard's eyes went wide for just a moment before narrowing. "You can't record in here. That's private property. Give me that phone, boy." He reached for Jamal, and Terrence immediately stepped between them, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "Do not touch my son." The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Every eye was on the unfolding scene. Some diners looked away embarrassed. Others watched with open fascination. A few looked outraged, though it wasn't clear whether they were angry at Richard's behavior or at the Henderson family for not leaving quietly. "I'm calling the police," Richard announced, pulling out his own phone. "You're trespassing." "Please do," Terrence said. "I'd be very interested in explaining to the authorities why you're refusing to honor a confirmed reservation and attempting to have a family with young children forcibly removed." As Richard barked into his phone, demanding police presence at the Sterling Oak for unruly customers, Jamal's mind was racing. His father had always told him that education was armor, that knowledge was power, that understanding your rights was the first step in defending them. Jamal thought about his father's best friend, Isaiah Blake, who wasn't just Uncle Derek's lawyer colleague but one of the most prominent civil rights attorneys in the state. Isaiah had given a talk at Jamal's school just last month about documentation, about the importance of evidence, about how cameras had become the most powerful tool in the fight for justice. Jamal zoomed in slightly, making sure the shot captured Richard's flushed, angry face, the empty tables visible in the background, the time stamp clearly visible on the screen. Within 10 minutes, 2 police officers arrived. Officer Patricia Chin and Officer Brandon Matthews stepped through the door, their expressions professional but wary. This wasn't the first time they'd been called to the Sterling Oak. Richard had a reputation for these kinds of calls. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Chin asked. Richard immediately launched into his version of events. "These people don't have a reservation and they're refusing to leave. They're harassing my staff and disrupting my other customers." Officer Matthews turned to Terrence. "Sir, do you have proof of a reservation?" Terrence pulled out his phone, bringing up the confirmation email, the calendar reminder, the credit card charge for the deposit. He showed everything methodically, his hands steady. Officer Chin examined the evidence, then looked at Richard. "Mr. Thornberry, this appears to be a valid reservation. Why are they being asked to leave?" Because there was a system error. We're at capacity. I have the right to refuse service." "You have the right to refuse service within the bounds of the law," Officer Matthews said carefully. "You can't refuse service based on protected characteristics. Race, for instance." "I never said anything about race." Richard's voice pitched higher. "How dare you insinuate, this is my restaurant. I built this place from nothing. I have standards." Officer Chen's eyes swept the dining room, noting the demographics of the current patrons, all white, all affluent looking. She'd been a police officer for 15 years and she knew what this was. "Mr. Henderson, what would you like to do?" Terrence looked at his wife, at his frightened daughter, at his son still recording everything with fierce determination in his eyes. "We'd like to be seated at our reserved table. We came here to celebrate my daughter's achievement." That's all we want. Richard's face had gone from red to nearly purple. Absolutely not. I will not be bullied in my own establishment. Officer, remove them for trespassing. Officer Chin shook her head slightly. Sir, I can't do that. They have a confirmed reservation. Legally, you entered into a contract when you accepted their booking. If you refuse to honor it without cause, you could be opening yourself up to a discrimination lawsuit. I don't care about lawsuits. I want them gone. And there it was. Richard had said the quiet part loud. The malice that had been simmering beneath the surface of politeness and pretense was now fully exposed. Jamal captured every word. Officer Matthews intervened. Mr. Thornberry, I strongly suggest you honor this reservation. Otherwise, you're creating a situation that's going to end very badly for you. But Richard was beyond reason. Pride, prejudice, and decades of unchecked entitlement had him in their grip. Get out, he said, his voice shaking with rage. Get out of my restaurant. All of you. And if you ever try to come back, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Terrence took a deep breath, and Vanessa placed her hand over his. This was the calculation, the exhausting mathematics of survival. They could push this, escalate it, sit down at a table and force the issue. But at what cost? Zara was already crying quietly. Jamal looked shaken despite his brave documentation. And Richard clearly wasn't going to back down, which meant this could turn violent. We'll leave, Terrence finally said. But this isn't over. As the Henderson family walked toward the door, heads held high despite the humiliation, several other diners called out. This is disgusting, one woman said loudly. Richard, I've been coming here for years, but I'll never set foot in this place again. An older gentleman stood up. You should be ashamed of yourself, Thornberry. But Richard stood his ground, arms crossed, watching them leave with something like triumph in his eyes. He'd won. He'd maintained his standards. He'd protected his establishment from what he saw as an intrusion. He had no idea what he'd actually done. The Henderson family walked to their car in silence. Zara climbed into the back seat, wiping tears from her face. Vanessa stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched. Terrence gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale. And Jamal uploaded the video. He didn't tell his parents at first. He just opened his social media app, added a simple caption. Kicked out of the Sterling Oak for being black. Please share. And hit post. Then he texted the video to Uncle Isaiah. Within an hour, as the Henderson family sat in a different restaurant across town trying to salvage Zara's celebration, Jamal's phone started buzzing. First one notification, then another, then dozens, then hundreds. The video was spreading like wildfire. By the time they got home that night, it had been viewed over 50,000 times. By morning, that number had climbed to 2 million. News outlets were picking it up. Civil rights organizations were sharing it. Comments poured in from all over the country, expressing outrage, support, and disbelief that this kind of blatant discrimination still happened. But that was just the beginning. Because Jamal's text to Isaiah had set other wheels in motion. Isaiah Blake sat in his home office that Saturday night, watching the video for the third time. He'd known Terrence Henderson since law school, had been best man at his wedding, was godfather to Jamal. And seeing his friend's family humiliated like this ignited something in him that went beyond professional obligation. This was personal. Isaiah was a partner at Blake & Associates, a firm that specialized in civil rights litigation. They'd successfully sued corporations, municipalities, and institutions across the Southeast. They had resources, connections, and a track record that made defendants nervous. Sunday morning, Isaiah called Terrence. I'm taking the case. Pro bono. Isaiah, you don't have to. Yes, I do. What happened to your family is exactly why I became a lawyer. We're going to make this right. By Monday afternoon, a formal complaint had been filed with the South Carolina Human Rights Commission. By Tuesday, Isaiah had drafted a federal civil rights lawsuit and sent a notice to Richard Thornberry and the Sterling Oak. The complaint outlined violations of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, sought compensatory damages for emotional distress, and demanded punitive damages to send a message that this behavior wouldn't be tolerated. The story had now been picked up by major national news networks. Reporters camped outside the Sterling Oak, filming its increasingly empty dining room as customers abandoned the restaurant in droves. Richard Thornberry released a statement denying any wrongdoing, claiming the incident was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by race-baiting activists, which only made things worse. Social media was merciless. The restaurant's review pages were flooded with one-star ratings. Food critics who'd previously praised the Sterling Oak now published scathing pieces condemning both the food, suddenly finding flaws they'd overlooked before, and the ownership. Local civil rights groups organized peaceful protests outside the restaurant. Jamal watched it all unfold with a mixture of awe and trepidation. His video, his documentation had started this avalanche. What would you do if you witnessed something like this? Would you speak up or would you stay silent? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. But the most significant development came from an unexpected source. One of the servers at the Sterling Oak, a young woman named Kelly Rodriguez, came forward with her own story. She'd worked at the restaurant for 3 years and had witnessed Richard Thornberry refuse service to black customers at least a dozen times. She'd seen him instruct his hostesses to claim there were no tables available when black families arrived, even when the restaurant was half empty. She'd heard him make racist comments about customers and staff. And she had documentation, text messages, emails, internal memos that revealed a pattern of discrimination going back years. Kelly's testimony transformed the case from a single incident into evidence of systematic discrimination. Other former employees came forward too. Stories emerged of black staff members being passed over for promotions, being assigned to back-of-house positions where they wouldn't be visible to customers, being paid less than their white counterparts for the same work. The Sterling Oak wasn't just guilty of one night's worth of discrimination. It was built on it. 2 weeks after the incident, Isaiah filed an amended complaint expanding the lawsuit to a class action, representing not just the Henderson family but all the customers and employees who'd been discriminated against over the years. The potential damages were now in the millions. Richard Thornberry hired a high-priced legal team from a big Atlanta firm. They tried to paint the Henderson family as troublemakers looking for a payday. They claimed the video was selectively edited. They argued that business owners had the right to refuse service for any reason. But Isaiah had seen these tactics before. During the discovery process, he subpoenaed the restaurant's reservation system, revealing a pattern of mysteriously canceled bookings for customers with stereotypically black names. He deposed staff members who testified under oath about Richard's discriminatory practices. He brought in expert witnesses on implicit bias and the economic impact of racial discrimination. Meanwhile, Jamal had become something of a reluctant celebrity. News programs wanted to interview him. His video had been viewed over 20 million times. Schools invited him to speak about civic responsibility and the power of documentation. He handled it all with a maturity that made his parents proud and slightly worried. 14 was young to be thrust into the national spotlight, even for a good cause. One night, about a month after the incident, Vanessa sat with Jamal in his room. "How are you really doing with all this?" she asked. Jamal thought about it. "I'm okay, I think. Sometimes it feels weird that this got so big. I just wanted people to see what happened. I didn't think." He trailed off. "You did the right thing," Vanessa said softly. "You documented the truth. What people do with that truth is up to them, but you gave them the chance to see it. Are you mad that I posted it without asking?" Vanessa smiled, though there was sadness in it. "No, baby. I'm proud of you. What happened that night was humiliating and wrong, but you turned it into something that might actually change things. That takes courage." The case moved slowly as these things do. Months passed. The Sterling Oaks business never recovered. Richard tried to rebrand, issuing public apologies that rang hollow, offering diversity training for his staff, pledging to do better. But the damage was done. Customers didn't return. Investors pulled out. The restaurant that had once been Charleston's premier dining destination was hemorrhaging money. 6 months after the incident, Richard Thornberry's legal team reached out to Isaiah about a settlement. They were willing to offer a substantial sum to make the case go away. Isaiah presented the offer to Terrence and Vanessa. It was more money than they'd expected, enough to ensure Jamal and Zara's college education would be fully funded with plenty left over. But the Hendersons had a different idea. "We don't want just money," Terrence said. "We want real change." Working with Isaiah, they negotiated a settlement that included financial compensation, yes, but also required the Sterling Oak to implement comprehensive anti-discrimination policies, undergo regular civil rights audits, and establish a scholarship fund for students of color pursuing careers in hospitality. Richard Thornberry would be required to undergo extensive diversity and sensitivity training and issue a public on-camera apology that would be published on the restaurant's website and social media channels. Richard resisted, but his lawyers made it clear: accept these terms or face a trial that would almost certainly result in a larger judgment and criminal charges for civil rights violations. The evidence against him was overwhelming. 8 months after that Saturday night in June, the settlement was finalized. The press conference was held at Isaiah's law office, with the Henderson family seated at a long table facing cameras from every major news outlet in the region. Jamal sat next to his father, feeling the weight of the moment. This had started with him holding up his phone in a moment of instinct and anger. Now it was ending with real accountability. Isaiah spoke first, outlining the terms of the settlement, praising the Henderson family's courage, and emphasizing that this case represented a larger fight against discrimination that was far from over. Then Terrence spoke. What happened to my family happens to countless other families every day in restaurants, in stores, in schools, in workplaces. The only difference is that we had documentation. We had resources. We had privilege that many others don't have. His voice was steady, measured. This settlement isn't just about making my family whole. It's about creating systems that protect everyone, especially those who don't have platforms or lawyers or viral videos. Vanessa added, we hope this sends a message to other business owners. Discrimination has consequences. Not just legal consequences but moral ones. You can't build a sustainable business on hatred and exclusion. And then it was Jamal's turn. The teenager who'd started it all with a smartphone and a sense of justice looked into the cameras. I was scared that night, he said honestly. I didn't know if recording would make things better or worse. But my dad always taught me that silence in the face of injustice is itself an injustice. So I documented what I saw. I want other young people to know that they have power. Your voice matters. Your witness matters. Don't be afraid to stand up and speak out, because sometimes one person with the courage to tell the truth can change everything. The room erupted in camera flashes and questions, but Jamal felt a calmness settle over him. This chapter was closing, but the larger story, the ongoing fight for dignity and equality, continued. As for Richard Thornberry, he appeared at a separate press conference later that day, looking diminished and chastened. His apology was stilted and clearly scripted by lawyers, but it was public and permanent. The Sterling Oak would continue to operate under new management, with Richard removed from all decision-making roles. The restaurant would serve as a case study in how discrimination destroys not just lives but legacies. In the months and years that followed, the Henderson family returned to something like normalcy, though they were changed by the experience. Zara eventually got her proper celebration, at a restaurant that welcomed them with genuine warmth. Terrence and Vanessa became advocates for civil rights, speaking at community events and supporting organizations fighting discrimination. And Jamal? He continued documenting the world around him, using his phone and his platform to shine light on injustice wherever he found it. He started a YouTube channel focused on youth activism and civil rights education. His first video, the original footage from the Sterling Oak, remained his most viewed, but the videos that followed were more purposeful, more educational, building a community of young people committed to creating change. The case became a landmark, cited in other discrimination lawsuits across the country. It was taught in law schools as an example of effective civil rights litigation. It was discussed in business schools as a cautionary tale about the cost of bias. But perhaps most importantly, it became a reminder that in the age of smartphones and social media, injustice can no longer hide in the shadows. When a 14-year-old boy decided to hit record rather than look away, he didn't just document one family's mistreatment. He illuminated a truth that too many people wanted to deny, that racism wasn't a relic of the past but a present reality that required present action. The Sterling Oak incident taught several crucial lessons. It showed that documentation is powerful, that speaking truth to power matters, that accountability is possible, and that ordinary people, even teenagers, can catalyze extraordinary change. It also revealed something uncomfortable but necessary. Discrimination persists not because people don't know it's wrong, but because they believe they can get away with it. Richard Thornberry didn't think there would be consequences for his actions. He'd been operating with that same mindset for years, and society had allowed it. Until it didn't. Until a family refused to accept humiliation quietly. Until a teenager decided to bear witness. Until a community said, enough. The Henderson family story isn't just about one night in one restaurant. It's about the cumulative weight of small indignities and large injustices that Black families carry every day. It's about the exhausting calculus of deciding when to fight and when to preserve your peace. It's about teaching your children to be strong while also trying to protect their innocence. It's about the gap between the America we claim to be and the America we actually are. But it's also about resilience, about the power of truth, about the importance of allies and advocates, and about the possibility of accountability. It's about how change happens, not through grand gestures but through individuals making brave choices in critical moments. Jamal Henderson made such a choice. He was just a kid trying to protect his family and document an injustice. He couldn't have known his video would be viewed millions of times, would spark a national conversation, would lead to a landmark legal case, would inspire other young people to speak up. But that's how change works. It starts with one person deciding that this time, this injustice, this moment matters enough to do something about it. Years later, Jamal would reflect on that night and the months that followed. He'd think about the scared 14-year-old holding up a phone with shaking hands, trying to capture evidence of discrimination while his family was being humiliated. He'd remember the weight of watching the video go viral, the pressure of interviews and attention, the satisfaction of seeing real consequences and real change. And he'd realize that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. Courage is a teenager with a smartphone standing up to a powerful business owner. Courage is parents teaching their children to demand dignity even when the world tries to deny it. Courage is a community rallying around justice even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. The story of the Henderson family and the Sterling Oak became a touchstone, referenced whenever people debated the persistence of racism, the power of documentation, the importance of accountability. It was proof that viral videos can translate into real-world consequences, that social media activism can drive legal change, that speaking up matters. But beyond the legal settlements and policy changes and public apologies, there was something more fundamental at stake: the basic human dignity that every person deserves regardless of the color of their skin. The right to walk into a restaurant with your family and be treated with respect. The right to celebrate your child's achievements without facing humiliation. The right to exist in public spaces without constantly calculating whether you're welcome. These shouldn't be revolutionary concepts. They should be baseline expectations. And yet, for too many families like the Hendersons, they're rights that have to be fought for, defended, documented, and litigated. That's why Jamal's decision to record mattered so much. In that moment, he transformed a private humiliation into public accountability. He created evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away. He gave his family and countless others a tool to fight back against injustice. And in doing so, he joined a long tradition of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat. Ruby Bridges walking into that school. The students sitting at the lunch counter. The marchers crossing the bridge. Throughout history, change has come not from people waiting for permission but from people deciding that the time for waiting was over. Jamal didn't set out to be a civil rights activist. He just wanted to protect his family. But sometimes that's enough. Sometimes one act of courage ripples outward in ways you can't predict, touching lives you'll never meet, inspiring actions you'll never see. The Sterling Oak incident reminds us that the fight for equality isn't over. Discrimination didn't end with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It didn't disappear after Obama's presidency. It persists in restaurant hostess stands and real estate offices and hiring managers' decisions and 1,000 other small moments where bias determines who gets access and who gets excluded. But it also reminds us that we're not powerless against that discrimination. We have tools, smartphones, social media, legal systems, community solidarity, that previous generations didn't have. We have the ability to document injustice, to share it widely, to demand accountability, and to create change. We just have to be brave enough to use them. So if you're loving this story of justice and standing up for what's right, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of triumph over adversity. The Henderson family story doesn't have a fairy tale ending where racism is defeated and everyone lives happily ever after. Racism doesn't work like that. It's not a single dragon you can slay. It's a hydra that grows new heads, that adapts and evolves, that finds new ways to exclude and diminish. But the Henderson family story does have something perhaps more valuable than a fairy tale ending. It has a real ending that demonstrates that resistance matters, that documentation matters, that speaking up matters, and that sometimes, not always but sometimes, justice is possible. Richard Thornberry lost his restaurant, his reputation, and his ability to discriminate with impunity. The Henderson family received compensation and the satisfaction of knowing they'd fought back. Other families facing similar discrimination found hope and inspiration in their story. Young people like Jamal learned that they had power to create change. These aren't small victories. They're the building blocks of progress. And they remind us that the arc of the moral universe doesn't bend toward justice on its own. It bends because people like the Henderson family refuse to accept injustice. It bends because teenagers like Jamal document the truth. It bends because lawyers like Isaiah fight in courtrooms. It bends because communities rally and support and demand better. It bends because we bend it. So the next time you witness injustice, whether it's blatant discrimination in a restaurant or subtle bias in a classroom or workplace, Remember the Henderson family. Remember that you have power. Your phone can document truth. Your voice can demand accountability. Your actions can inspire others. Remember that courage isn't reserved for heroes in history books. It's available to all of us in small moments and large ones, in decisions to speak up rather than stay silent, to record rather than look away, to fight rather than accept. Remember that change is possible, but only if we're willing to work for it, to risk comfort and convenience for justice and dignity. And remember that every great movement for social change started with individuals deciding that this injustice, this moment, mattered enough to do something about it. That Saturday evening in June, when the Henderson family walked into the Sterling Oak, they were just trying to celebrate a little girl's achievement. They didn't set out to start a movement or make history or become symbols of resistance. But when faced with injustice, they made a choice. They documented it. They fought back. They demanded accountability. And in doing so, they reminded all of us that we have the same choice available to us. The only question is, will we be brave enough to make it? In the face of bias and injustice, courage and determination don't just sometimes win, they're the only things that have ever won. And that courage can come from anywhere, even from a 14-year-old boy with a smartphone and a belief that what he was witnessing was wrong. Jamal Henderson didn't know he was starting something that would ripple across the country when he pressed record. He just knew he had to do something. He couldn't stand there and watch his family be humiliated without bearing witness to it. And that simple act of witnessing, of saying, "I see this, the world needs to see this, and this cannot stand," changed everything. That's the power we all have. The power to witness. The power to document. The power to resist. The power to demand better. The power to bend that arc toward justice, one brave choice at a time.